I forgot to add us to the stream, but what is going on, everybody? This is Brandon from ComixKings. Welcome, everybody, back to the kingdom, or welcome if this is your first time. Today, we are joined with Phill Jimenez. Thank you so much for being here so last minute.
Like I was saying before, the best way sometimes to get me is last minute. But I always tell anyone, if you need anything from me, pester me relentlessly. I am a guy who is out of sight, out of mind. And so if you need to get in touch with me, you have to bug me constantly. And not
right. there you go, you know, and that's that. I don't like to bug people. I'm just like, hey, if you could do it, feel free. And you're like, hey, work. So thank you so much for granting me as much time as you have today in your day. I know we're all busy, so the fact that you're giving me some time is very great. But, you know, if you guys don't know who Phill Jimenez is, that's probably because you're a new reader, because he's a veteran. He's been doing a lot of work since the 90s. He's done Wonder Woman. He did some ASM during Brand New Day, did some all-new X-Men, or the new X-Men with Grant Morrison, which is great. Trade record continues. I don't know if that's a trade rec, buddy, but thank you, everyone, for being in the chat today. Phill has also done Infinite Crisis, so that was like the premiere of Jaime Reyes that he was a part of, which is great. And...
Hey.
Yeah, you're like, oh yeah, I did that. Did I? Yeah. And I know there's a lot of stuff that I'm missing because you've been in the game for so long. But, you know, if you guys do want to catch up on his stuff, he does have a project, Kelly Sue DeConnick coming out soon. So definitely make sure you guys stay tuned for that. That is going to be under the Black Label. And yeah, he's a veteran LGBTQ creator who we were going to have at the end of the show, of the end of the month, as we are celebrating Pride Month here on this segment of Tag Team Thursday. If you guys want to go back and catch the rest of the videos, we started with spotlighting characters of the X-Men, then DC Comics. Next week, we're going to be talking about the next generation, so a lot of our younger heroes are going to share that spotlight. And today, we're going to be spotlighting Phill Jimenez. So again, thank you for being here. How are you doing today? How are you doing? I didn't ask that at first.
I'm doing great. I live in New York City, and the weather is freaking amazing right now. I'm indoors most of the day because I'm still working. I'm trying to get this job done for this Black Label book. But it's hard to be sour when the weather's so nice outside.
Right. Yeah, it is getting beautiful out. The cicadas, I don't know in your area, but in mine, they're going away. So there's definitely that to look forward to. So you don't have to hear like a freaking kindergarten graduation screaming in your ear.
That's very but all is well. All is well.
There you go.
And thank you for having me, by the way.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely 100% my pleasure to have you on today. If you guys have a question, make sure you ask it because it will be spotlighted on the show. You guys will get to ask Phill a question if you have one. I'm just like Bravo says. Is the whole topic today going to be LGBTQ comics? Yes, it is, because we have been doing that on Tag Team Thursday. All right. And I'm seeing a lot of people jumping into the chat. So thank you guys all for being here. Phill, just a quick question. When you started like in comics, what was representation in the LGBTQ plus community like?
So do you mean, so that's actually a two-pronged question. Do you mean creators or do you mean in the books?
Let's start with creators. Let's start because I know that was kind of a time as well.
It is an interesting time. So the reason I even have I'm a blip in history is because apparently I was the first out gay creator in mainstream superhero comics. Now there's a whole world of other alternative comics, as you know, where there were a lot of out gay creators, etc. And as a matter of fact, I'm just dropping this in here. There's a new movie called No Straight Lines. It's a documentary. I highly recommend you get it, for a whole different glimpse, a whole other world, a whole other aspect of the comic making world. And it's a lot of the older generation of LGBTQ creators. And it's really amazing. And it's based on a book by Justin Hall. And I just saw it at Tribeca Film Festival, and it's wonderful. Anyway, so I ended up making history, apparently, as the first out gay creator. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of representation. I believe North Star had just come out of the closet. There was a character named Estrano at DC Comics. And there were some lesbian characters. And Vertigo Comics, the adult line at DC, had just started making strides in the business late 80s, early 90s. And so there was some representation there, but it was light. My actually first LGBT contribution was with Grant Morrison working on The Invisibles, which was his amazing Vertigo book about a group of essentially like magician anarchists. And one of the characters was a Brazilian drag queen shaman named Lord Fanny. And if memory serves, like that was like one of the first visible trans or drag characters ever in comics. And I did not create her, but I'm sort of well known for drawing her when I did.
Well, there you go. I mean, I haven't read Invincibles. I should have, but I haven't gone down that path yet. But does the shirt say "Silence equals death and goose to mooch"?
It does.
Yep.
It's the old ACT UP slogan.
There you go. So and then with characters, right? Because we were kind of talking about how North Star kind of just came out of the closet. I know, and you said Vertigo were taking shots as well, because we know that Hellblazer, John Constantine with Azzarello came out as bi at that time. Which was later.
That was way later, actually.
That was way later.
Yeah, in the 90s, most of the LGBTQ characters that were introduced, although to be fair, George Perez introduced very clearly in the 1980s that there were same-sex couples among the Amazons. And there were, again, and John Byrne introduced Maggie Sawyer, who was a lesbian, the chief of police in Metropolis and Superman. So even back in the 80s, there were some characters. The interesting thing was it was always subtext. You didn't say it. Like, they weren't out, but if you knew for the clues, you could find them. One of my favorite things now is going back to look at all of North Star's first appearances, because at the time, Marvel Comics had a no gay policy. You couldn't use the word. You couldn't have gay characters. It's like 180 degrees difference now. But at the time, you were not allowed to have gay content. And so North Star is, I love going back and reading the old stuff, because if you know the clues, you can see it all in the subtext. It's all right there. But I think a lot of straight people like just passed it up. They didn't even get it. And it's kind of like one of those interesting things that happen when you have to hide that stuff. You end up with coded visuals or coded language. It's a really good history lesson to go back and look at those very early gay characters.
Right, 100%. And and we've even kind of seen that with Mystique a little bit. Because I want to say her timeline didn't really pick up until kind of the late 80s. We kind of got some hints. I do want to say late 80s. I don't know if that's correct, but that's kind of where my mind is right now with Mystique. And then obviously Iceman coming in the early 2000s. How do you think it's progressed over time, with the characters and kind of like the whole how the fans receive what creators are doing with LGBT?
So I was saying two things really happen. So for example, I was saying, I said it a million interviews, that like the X-Men to me were the original sort of, I'm going to say LGBTQ team. So even if they didn't have characters that were explicitly gay, the whole concept was about groups of outsiders and strangers getting together to find a family, to find a clique, and they were formed, they bonded because the outside world hated them, right? But they were on a path to figure out, if not assimilate, how do we at least coexist? And so their differences, which they were born with, are kind of what made the X-Men this amazing gay metaphor. And then, but there wasn't a lot of explicitly gay characters specifically. And then one of the things that's changed in the past, I'd say 20 years, is that more and more characters are coming out. So it's not just a concept or a theme, but now you have characters, now dozens of them, who fit somewhere on the LGBTQ spectrum. And that kind of specific representation is pretty amazing to me, because there was very little of it when I got into comics. And now it's pretty common, it feels like. For someone searching to see themselves in comics, there's definitely now a character somewhere on the spectrum.
Right. And when we were talking about X-Men a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, we even saw that in the Hellfire Gala, where you're just seeing these characters being unapologetically themselves, and that is something where X-Men that really belongs. Once they have that home, they're unapologetically themselves. They give zero crap. They give zero fucks, essentially. Excuse my language, everyone, but but deal with it. So X-Men has really been the turning point in kind of like social justice or like social representation and just self-expression is really where X-Men really fits that topic. You know, and to your point, you know, a lot of times people miss what goes on in X-Men because there are so many characters, and it's like it's something as a reader, right? I never like a story that is pushing a topic to feel forced, right? So if you push sexuality before a character, to me, I would much rather have the character sexuality is there as like an aspect of that character, not necessarily the forefront of the book, you know?
So I'm going to push back on that a little bit and just say that sometimes, because of the industry and we work, there's no way to do it but to push hard, and sometimes awkwardly, because the resistance on the other end is so strong. So sometimes there is no choice. And so people are like, oh, that didn't feel natural or organic. But I like to say there's nothing really natural or organic in our business. They're all business choices. They're all decisions that we make creatively because we think it's going to make a good story. So sometimes they're handled better or worse. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Right.
Sometimes they're terrible. But that decision making goes into if you're doing a crossover event, if you're making a character live or die, or if you're making a character gay. And then sometimes I think how we read it says way more about us than it does about the material.
That's a great point. You know, and I think like a lot of people, when it does come down to it, when they just see the word LGBT, they resist, right? But I think in times today, readers are being more open to it because we're seeing new people coming into the hobby every day, right? And you're seeing that being on the big screen, you know, whatever's happening in comics today will most times be on the big screen eventually, or it has the potential to. Maybe not, but
Sure.
some of the themes, right? Like, let's say you have Roxxon in the background of your comic book. Well, they could use that as like a snippet for a set. You know, you never know, and then boom, that artist royalties, boom, they're happy. But you know, like you said, like as readers, we do need to be more open into what the creative teams are doing with characters. Especially like in X-Men, I always think like that's like the best place. You know, and speaking of the Hellfire Gala, there were a lot of characters that had some lore in there.
Yeah.
Whereas like you were picking up on it, like a lot of people when we were talking about X-Men previously didn't know that Betsy was bisexual. But you know, in the gala, we kind of saw Tini Howard exploiting that a little bit more. Which is great because you have a lot of creators now. You're seeing a lot of creators coming out as well, which I think is also great, pushing the medium. So how do you feel like how comfortable creators are pushing their personal stories? Because as writers, I even like to write sometimes. I'm actually working on a story right now, 2 of them. We like to add some of our personal tales or personal experiences. How do you think that has really played into some of your writing or into some of the other creators that we're seeing, especially like in the X-Men today or even in other parts of the industry?
So my experience is that very little is ever created that's any good where the creator doesn't put a part of themselves in the work. If it's a question they're asking themselves about the world, or if it's some personal thing that they need to get out, they need to get on the page. I think all the best work is personal work. I don't think you can strip one from the other. I don't think you just come in like a robot and write. So for me, like one of the good and the bad of my work, when it's really good, when it's really bad, is it's all personal, right? So most people can hear my voice. They can see my spirit in the work. I think that's really true. The X-Men stuff that I was weaned on, like the Claremont stuff that sort of set the stage for all this stuff now, so much of that work is about what he was going through and thinking about and processing, and it was about his ideas about the world he was distilling through these characters and his interests and whatever. And so I think all these comics are kind of full of the spirits of their creators. Like that's just sort of how I feel about it. And when they want to start exploring questions, maybe because either they themselves are gay or they know someone on the spectrum and they want to on the LGBTQ spectrum and they want to sort of put them in the work and make sure they're represented. And a lot of people in my business, I have to say, I'm very impressed, are thoughtful about the world we live in, right? Like they want to expand readers' ideas of what the world can be.
Right.
That's pretty amazing, actually.
Right. You know, and I always think comics are the place where if you want to make a change, you put it in a source of literature. because literature, fiction,
Yeah.
right? Fiction, comic books, even just like a novel is supposed to push boundaries, especially in a comic book. It's supposed to push boundaries that we didn't even think possible, right? Which if you look at the movie industry, there's always that glass ceiling. You can only do so much. You have a budget. Comics don't. You can do it. You're as an artist, as a writer, you're God. You're God. Whatever you want goes. Unless if it's okay with your editor. But if it's okay with the editor.
Right.
So if you want to make a change or you want to highlight a topic, that comics are the perfect place to do so, especially with LGBT representation in my mind. Is if you want, like, I know that, and I'm always going back to X-Men because that's the perfect place to it. But I'm also going to throw in something that I saw recently in Gotham. It's not LGBT related, but it's something that I never thought about. Markia Tamaki depicted a scenario where Huntress was helping this lady out in Gotham, getting out of a stressful situation with her husband, with her partner. And I don't think they were married, just her partner. But they were, she said, being with him is worse than being on the streets of Gotham because she was going through abuse. Right. Which as a reader, I never thought that was possible because we're so distracted. So that was like a great way to push that that attention, that to that topic, which comics are the perfect medium for all of this stuff to happen.
You said something earlier which I love because I do think so the X-Men as metaphor is basically like you should be allowed to be yourself, right? Like, so I think Mystique has two of my favorite lines in the X-Men movies from way back. And the second one is X2, and it's Nightcrawler asks why she can look like anyone. She looks like that. Why she doesn't disguise herself and make her look different. She says, well, because we shouldn't have to, right? Like, it's a perfect line.
That was awesome.
It's amazing. And she's like, and that to me is the X-Men crystallized. So even if you're not into it as like a metaphor for LGBTQ themes, the very idea that you should be allowed to be who you are without oppression, whatever that is, whatever your, I mean, I'm using this expression, but whatever your freak flag is, you should let it fly.
Yeah, like in that Shrek play, you're gonna be.
but for real, and that's one of the reasons I think the X-Men has remained so popular now for 50 years. But even like this, even the past 30, because that's the root of its theme, right? Is you should be allowed to be who you are without fear, and that's an amazing, to me, that's the core message and the most amazing part of that book. And so all those characters in whatever iteration they are, whatever sexuality they have, to me, the very best ones represent that idea. Right. They are without fear.
Exactly. And a lot of people give Jennifer Lawrence a lot of slack for that role, but I think that movie was perfect for her.
This one was before her. This was when it was Rebecca Romijn. This was X2.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. You're right. I'm so bad with actors. I know comic book artists, writers out the wazoo. It takes up so much space. I don't know who an actor is.
But it's okay. I only know it because I watched that movie a lot, and because part of it is that line. I really love that.
Right. Line. Yeah, and that's really powerful, and the whole thing that I've been trying to do on this show is promoting, and what I try to do at all my shows, not just this one, is promoting that anthem of be who you are in this community. We're in this comic book community. We're even on this internet to get away from all of life. We're here to enjoy our hobby. We're here to enjoy something we're all a fan of. Even though you're more in the industry, you're still a fan at heart. Hopefully. So no, just like, and I always say this, no matter who you are or what race you are, what sexuality, you are, make sure you are yourself here, and you're welcome with open arms. Just know that. I just want to throw it out there.
And also, something I think is actually also really important is like, no matter who you are, like I was just talking to a friend of mine, a younger friend, about also, even I get in these places where I think like, oh shoot, they're like different than I am. I'll have nothing in common with them, right? Or and I have to remind myself that everyone has a really interesting story, right? And so while we want everyone to be themselves, we also want to make sure that just because they're themselves doesn't mean that you can't connect with them, if they seem different than you, right? So
Right, because we can all connect through something, whether if you saw that Netflix show or if you read
100.
this headline, I think the world, you can really make the world a lot smaller. Like I know race and sexuality are two broad topics that are very sensitive to a lot of people,
Right.
right? Because race and sexuality basically iterate there is a story. I'm Jewish, so there is a story to some level of discrimination. Even let's say like being white or being Hispanic, being black, being mixed. Or being
Right.
LGBT. There's some level of dysfunction that tells your story. You can make the world a lot smaller and make someone feel more accepting by just making it smaller and talk about, let's say, a Netflix show or a book you read, or hey, did you see this dope whatever the fuck, or I like your shirt. Some stuff like that can really go a long way.
For sure. Or if you're a mutant at a school and you're from a different country, going back to the comics for a minute, the X-Men. That was always one of the coolest things about when I was so into the X-Men in the 80s and 90s, is there were all these strangers and all these like foreign kids from all over the place, and they had this one thing in common, which is they were all mutants, right? And yet somehow they had to bridge all these gaps. But they did have this thing in common. They had this one unifying factor, and it's sort of what made them an amazing family and team.
Right. Well, 100%, and you've been doing a lot of Pride covers. For those of you who do not know, Phill Jimenez has been drawing the Pride covers. I know, because I like the one behind us, which is the one that I couldn't buy in a Vertigo. It was $100, and I'm like, oh, that must be $100.
I hear they're expensive.
They're expensive. Like I bought this for a.
Yeah, you told me. I was just like,
yeah.
Wow, that's wrong. I don't even know if I have my copies of them.
Wow, not the Virgin, because I bought this and I think my LCS underpriced it. But I went to I went to another store and I was like, oh, you have this, you have the North Star one, and they're like, yeah. I'm like, how much? And they're like, boom. But I'm like, wow. I'm like, oh, now I feel bad for making it up on the ladder for that. But how would you talk about your inspiration for doing some of these covers? Because like the background, not on this one, but because there is no background, but for the other ones, have like kind of like some key issues for them, or some books where they do appear. What's up, Jen? Jen was actually, before we get to that, I'm sorry, but Jen was a huge help in me spotlighting and making the show as professional as it is. So big shout out to Jen. Because every time I have a question, I'm like, Jen, does this sound socially acceptable? Am I sounding educated? Does this sound right? Am I using the proper terms? Jen has been great, so I love her to death. But
thank you, Jen.
But hey, big thank you to Jen. But yeah, talk to us about the covers you've been doing a lot, because they're great.
So people really like them. I'm very happy. It was actually really funny. This amazing editor, Emily at Marvel, reached out to me like months and months ago. It was beginning of the year. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, asking if I could do these, what I thought was going to be one cover, and then it turned out to be 9. And it was like, okay, sure. And what was fun about that is, as I mentioned before, I've been in this business for a really long time. It's my 30th anniversary. But I've actually never done anything specifically like LGBTQ theme like that. So it's like, that's really cool. And then we went through the list, and I think Marvel chose characters. I honestly think that they were going to be in movies or something like that. Because there was a long list of characters, and then they're the ones who told me which ones to draw. And I was like, great. And then I came up with this concept. What I wanted behind them was the original idea, and you can see it in the black and whites that I shared on my Instagram account. I just wanted very famous covers from Marvel Comics that were LGBTQ themed, and I wanted them all to have the same cover, right? Because I wanted on a rack, I wanted them all to look like they were part of the same event. And then I just decided to draw them. Not decided. Then I just decided on the design. So once I had that background, I just drew the characters. And again, it was really, really fun. I'm trying to think, like characters like Valkyrie I'd never drawn before. Wicked and Hulking, it's so funny because in my head, Luciano Vecchio like draws and
Russell Dodderman did a cover. I know.
Yeah, but Jim Chung and then Jamie McKelvey. So there are these people in my head that drew these characters. So when I draw characters, I like to go to the source material and see what they look like. And then that's how that's what I used for a reference. And it was amazing how nervous I was drawing particularly Hulking and Wiccan and America Chavez, because I wanted my peers who created these characters to like what I did.
Right. I know Jim would love it. I know Doggerman would love it. Luciano, I want that print. I really want that print of his.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about.
I sent the drawings to different artists just to make sure it was okay. So for me, part of the joy of this was to work on characters created by people who are my friends, who I'm also really big fans of, and kind of getting their praise. And then just again, like North Star, I do have to say, I really love my black and white version of North Star, because the joke is kind of like me in my head. He's like the old guard gay character of the Marvel universe, but he's also like a celebrity. So in my head, I imagined, he got some work done before he took the picture. So that's how I drew him. Like,
right. Yeah. North Star he was just strutting and all that. He was stunning, but
so it was fun. I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity, and I'm glad to hear it sounds like it was really successful. People really liked it.
Right. Yeah. I know everyone that I've spoken to have said incredible things about it. I've been completely stupid with my money and bought every single X-Men Hellfire Gala cover,
which I love.
I'm like, I love them. We even dressed up for a weekly wrap-up show, and we wore our gala outfits. But I do want to highlight this one comment. This guy's the biggest mutant fan I know, and he loved your new X-Men. And he's a very good friend. But back to what we were talking about. You should do a Richter and North Star cover. That would be really cool.
So there was a big list of characters. I can't honestly say I know how Marvel narrowed them down. They had a list, but Richter was on. Yep. A bunch of like Sarah from Angela was on it. Like a bunch of them were on it, and those are the ones they chose. So I was just like, thank you.
Right. And even prepping for these shows, I'm like looking at these characters. I'm like thinking, oh yeah, because when I have a 15-minute segment, I can only do so much, or even a 30-minute segment, I can only do so much. We're almost at that half hour, and we haven't even really explored as much as we could. So time is a thing. So it's like I'm looking at these lists 5-10 years ago. If I pulled up this list, I wouldn't have been able to see as many names.
Oh, so no. It was a short list.
It was like, Wiccan and Hulkling. It was like, Wiccan and Hulkling. Maybe Kate Bishop. Some X-Men.
Right.
Some X-Men. But now it's like, the fact that I have to subtopic is, to me, as a reader, as a fan, and as an ally to the community, is fantastic, is fantastic.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. I have to say, Marvel gave full support. Like, my editor was amazing on that project. It was really, really great. Also, just a quick bit of LGBTQ history. I always like to say that I started working at DC Comics when I was 20 years old, and I grew up in those halls, and it was a great place to grow up. I do want to give a shout out to the business folks and the editors and the publisher at DC, because they made a super great safe space for folks like me, and it was really pretty incredible to walk those halls and make work for them, and not really without fear, right? Like, I don't think a lot of people get that. And
was there a level of fear when you were in the industry?
No, I've been really distressed to hear my younger peers, like some of the ones you were talking about, who I think were much more afraid than I was. I worked in the comics, and it was so interesting in the 90s how different it was than it felt like it was later. I was not afraid, and I had a lot of gay friends in the business, and we had a really good time. But I like talking to the younger generation. It sounds like they're a little more afraid, like they're a little more concerned.
Right. And why do you think that is?
That bums me out.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, it gets all businessy, and I won't get too deep into it. But as corporations took over as like Disney and Warner Brothers really took control, and as the movies became like multi-billion-dollar things, there's more hands and more corporate concerns. And that said, I mean, I think I think, for example, looking at Marvel's roster right now, they're hiring a lot of LGBTQ creators, putting out a lot of LGBTQ content. So I can complain about that, but I get the sense that from a business perspective, it's a little more unstable, right? So
Right.
a lot of creators might be a little more nervous about their
Right.
gigs than I was. But in terms of being able to sort of represent and create these characters, I think it's better than it's ever been.
Yeah, I agree, especially because like I see like kind of the X-Men clique of creators like Tini Howard, Lee Williams, Vita Ayala. They're like always hanging out, and I'm like, this is so great because their books are so great and so
Right.
in tone with these characters. So I'm like, I'm loving it. My good friend V, all the way from New Zealand here today.
I mean,
Wow, she made it all the way from Australia, and
oh
y'all
my God,
catching the
there.
yeah, if y'all catching the
Like
replay,
7 in the morning or something.
it should be pretty early. But I just want to give a quick shout out to everyone catching the show live. You guys are the reason this is a thing. Also, shout out to people catching the replay. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe to the channel if you like what you're seeing. I think this is a good segue to plug what I'm doing because we do have a good number of people in the chat. Tomorrow on Weekly Wrap Up, we are teaming up with Becky Clunan and Michael Conrad for a giveaway. All you have to do is come to the live show and comment hashtag Wonder Woman and stay to the end and you could win a free signed Wonder Woman number 770. And if you really like that book, if you really like this book when it gets in your hand, go check out some of Phil's work because he did a great Wonder Woman run, which is very seminal. And okay, it's 11:50.
Okay.
So you couldn't have woken up like 30 minutes earlier. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Also on Saturday, if you guys like what we're doing here, I'm gonna have a very kind of similar conversation. Not similar conversation because we're probably gonna be talking about Green Lantern, but Alex Sinclair will be on the show for the 1 year anniversary of Creators Corner. He was the first guest ever to be on the show. Back when we were doing stuff on IG Live, so having him back on the show is great. So make sure you guys are with ComixKings all weekend because we have a giveaway and an interview. It's gonna be awesome. And Becky and Mike will be on the show tomorrow as well. So I just want to talk about that. I know when, I know, I know at the end of shows, whenever I say, stay tuned for the announcements, no one watches. So I want to throw that in. Oh, I do like this idea. Mr. Jimenez should do an LGBTQ poster with all the characters.
That was the original idea for this set of covers, but the time constraint was too short. They like needed them really fast. So I couldn't do it.
And she doubles.
But like I really wanted to because I love doing those like all those character jams. So maybe next year I'll do that.
There you go. And also in kind of in the LGBT world, we have recently it happened during the pandemic. So if you're out of tune to it, get tuned because Wiccan and Hulkling are now married. What were your thoughts on when you were hearing that, Phil? I know you didn't work on them, but I know it's a good conversation to have.
My thoughts are highly unromantic, meaning I don't think young people should get married.
They can still have fun.
No.
Even though he's a king.
That was probably a really terrible thing to say. I just always like young people to go live their life. Like my cousins all got married around 30. I'm like, that's the good age to get married. You know what? It's I think yet another sign of progress that it's in a relatively short period of time you can not only introduce a gay couple that will become superstars literally in that universe. I mean, I think and show up on TV shows, and then you can marry them, and they can get married in the pages of a Marvel comic. I think that's ridiculous, in the very, very best way. I just think it continues to show signs of progress, and I think in 10 years it's going to be really important because I do believe there are going to be readers who see that and think that could be me, and that's what you always want.
Right. That's honestly the beauty of comics today, and I know that. As an industry, there's so much more steps to go with representation. Now, I used to teach karate, so the thing that I love seeing, and I used to teach in an area that was more minority based, like more minority popular. Like I think I was the only white person in the building, like day in and day out. But which I loved, I really didn't mind because that's like the beauty of America. That's the beauty of the country we live in, and just how far we've come over time. What I was saying is like seeing them dress up for Halloween, right? you see them wearing Miles Morales. I saw a girl wearing Kamala Khan. I saw some Spider-Gwens. I saw a bunch of like really, really cool costumes, right? Because like now these kids can look and say, okay, that's my Spider-Man. That's my Miss Marvel. These are like my characters I can grow up with. Like I will say, like, okay, yeah, Peter Parker is a Spider-Man I relate to more. But for a lot of people, it's Miles Morales, which is a beautiful thing. For a lot of Middle Eastern people, Kamala Khan is their gig, which is so beautiful, right? Riri Williams, next Iron Man. And for a lot of LGBT people, that really got pushed forward with Wiccan and Hulkling. I know North Star was first, but really it was Wiccan and Hulkling pushing that agenda, and then followed by Iceman, with Cena Grace did an incredible job with Kevin Wada.
No. And again, that's the sort of stuff that I appreciate so much. And just seeing, and also, quite frankly, I just think it's good business. The wider and broader your character base, the more likely you're going to touch a bunch of different people who may or may not be interested in, like, say, all the Marvel superheroics, but they're like you just said, Kamala Khan, like, oh, that's, I mean, her success, I think, is classic proof of if you have a well-done comic book character centered in that universe, but designed to sort of appeal to a particular audience. The beautiful thing about that is if it's good material, it can appeal to everyone. But I'm sort of babbling a little bit, but the idea basically is that the wider and broader your character base, the more likely you're going to have different kinds of people sampling the work, right? And then they'll get into it, and then they'll learn about other characters through the work, and then they'll get invested in the universe as a whole. I think it's one of the ways the Marvel Cinematic Universe has done such a good job over all these years. You start with one, and then you introduce a couple here, and then it builds and builds and builds. And then over a period of time, that's how people get interested and excited about all of it. And they talk about all of it, and they become fans. And so I actually just think representation of any kind is good business. Beyond like the important kind of ethics of it, or like being a good citizen, I think it's a great way to get new readers.
Right. Well, yeah, 100%, because every day, right, we're a very diverse country, we're getting like a lot of more interracial characters, a lot of interracial children growing up, leading the next generation. And comics, in my mind, are still what's leading that next generation. That's where social change can happen, is in a comic book. Works of fiction can mean so much in the grand scheme, right? Because they're so subtle, but they're so powerful. Kind of tying it back to what Tamaki did in her Detective Comics issue. Now I'm getting a lot of slack in the chat because I said Empire was incredible. I don't care what you say; it was incredible. And think about what they were able to accomplish during the pandemic when they had to cut down a lot of that event. It pushed characters, it aged up characters, and it brought back Uatu. And it's leading into Al Ewing's next project, and it aged up these characters. It gave them new roles. Yeah, you see Hulkling becoming king, which I know you probably didn't ask for, but deal with it. He's the king now, and deal with it. At least you're having an LGBT character now in a position of power, uniting an empire, leading two popular races forward in the cosmic universe, expanding that agenda that Al Ewing is pushing forward. And Dan Slott did it to help out with it too.
That was amazing.
So deal with it. Go back and reread it and look at what it did for the characters in the Marvel Universe. So suck it up. Deal with it. Valeris Kitty's also a great artist, so yeah. I'm sorry. I had to just put everyone on blast there.
That is great. See, I have to say, this interview, like, you're the exact reason I do my job. Your joy and excitement and the interest and everything you take from that, it thrills me and it makes me want to go back and draw more and more. I think, like, we can sometimes get lost. It's interesting because drawing comics is a pretty solitary little thing. It's just us and our pads, right? And without conventions and ways to meet people, I think a lot of us got very isolated and we sort of forgot why we did what we did. And your reaction, your joy is exactly the reason I do what I do.
Dude, that means so much. That means so much to me. because I know that obviously like talking to creators and having you guys reciprocate the same excitement I have for having you on the show is great. Wow, that was the highest of compliments. Thank you
Oh
so
no,
much.
it's I swear to God, it's just it made my night.
So I'll be expecting my commission in 30 days.
Done.
There's your there's your deadline. I'm kidding.
Around.
I'm totally kidding. Um, but uh, he's saying she lives in a very way and having books, which boom,
That's
boom.
what
That's
you
what
do it,
it's all
right?
about. And comic books, yeah, they're an escape, they're a hobby, but they can also speak to the real world. Um, I remember watching Star Wars: The Clone Wars as a kid, right? And I remember being able to take like they'd always have like these life lessons at like the start of the show, and I used to always remember taking them and using them in my daily life to help out with my school or work out with like a bully, right? And I'm just like, it just works, comics and fiction work great like that.
I tell the
Um,
story all the time. Again, this ages me, but you just mentioned Star Wars. Marvel Comics used to put out a Star Wars comic way back in the day when I was growing up, and there's an issue, and it was very dramatic. And the ending ended. It was a little melancholy ending, because even though the rebellion won, um, uh, then Princess Leia, I don't think she was a general yet, um, was pondering like what it means to win when so much destruction happens, and it was kind of mind blowing in the Star Wars comic. In the back of the saying, like the rebels are cheering and everyone's excited, and the lead character is thinking about like the gravity of war as a situation, right? That in her head, like we all lose a little something when we go to war, and that's a super simplification of it, but that sat in my little 9-year-old mind, uh, and has sat with me ever since, right? Like, so the way I look at kind of world events and the way I think about things, like as terrible as war, were really shaped by the questions that were asked of this character in a comic book years and years ago. So I do believe that they have incredible power if you get them at the right age, um, when minds are open to ask big questions and small, and not sometimes serious, but just about the way you want to navigate the world, the sort of person you want to be in the world. That's one of the reasons
right.
I loved superhero comics.
Right, and it's always like you aspire to be that person.
Yeah.
From a personal note, I always say that the Frank Miller story really helped me out when I was going through a rough time. I was like, and that's why Daredevil was like is my favorite, not one of my, he is my favorite. Fuck. I know I'm biased because X-Men is like off the charts right now, and I'm like all here for it. I'm still getting backlash for Empire. I'll deal with it. I said I liked it. Jesus Christ,
Wow.
it's good. It's good. Go back and reread. Open your eyes. Jesus Christ, get yourself a taste bud or fix your eyes. Get some glasses. Do whatever you got to do. Jeez, what's wrong with you people? I'm kidding. Yeah, but like oh my gosh. But and it's great to see how far we've come as society with representation. Because you're seeing like we said earlier, you're seeing like a lot more creators coming out and telling their own stories, or like you're seeing like creators like Steve Orlando, who has been doing work for a lot of years now, doing a creator-owned project, and which is very LGBT centric, which I know
Yeah.
is very meaningful to him. And you're just seeing like a lot of stuff coming full circle. Like I know a lot of people are going back reading Iceman. A lot of people are starting to get involved, and it's also a great way to be educated on the world today. 100%.
Yes, I agree with everything you just said. And for me, like, it's very exciting. Like, as I was mentioning before, since I'm kind of the grandpa in the business, to see this new wave of young creators, of just different creators, creators of different backgrounds, interests, points of origin, identities, making their stamp on comics, because that's really a gift. Like, we work in this kind of weird rarefied world, and not a lot of people get to play with the toys that we get to play with.
Right.
And so when the fact that they're not only getting an opportunity, but they're leaving a stamp is pretty incredible. I've often said, like, I have this run on Wonder Woman that people like. I wrote the encyclopedia. I get things in the movies. I'm doing this upcoming graphic novel. Like, very few people in the world get the opportunity to have Wonder Woman on their tombstone, right? Like Wonder Woman writer and artist. Like that's pretty great if you think about it. And so the fact that these younger creators and a lot of this fresh talent are now getting their opportunity to have to put their imprint and their stamp on the characters that mean so much to people around the world, I think is really wonderful, and we're really lucky.
There you go. And I want to get your take on this. Who do you think are some of the younger LGBT creators that are rising up? Obviously, we dropped a few names, but off the top of your head.
So I'm going to say younger to me, which might not actually mean younger. I mean, I work in Orlando, so I'm actually very eager to see him succeed. Vita, I'm very into. I was mentioning earlier, there's actually this really interesting crop of LGBTQ creators who are not working in superhero comics, but are doing all this really interesting stuff in the alternative scene and the punk scene. I love that work. I'm very, very into it and very excited to see themselves represented in that world. And there's this whole, their take on comics and narrative is really interesting to me. I'm trying to think who else. Of course, now we were talking. I'm blanking.
We were talking about James Tynion. We were talking about
a couple people I can see in my head.
Cena Grace. We were talking about Leah Williams. We were talking about Teeny.
Yeah, and again, everyone's path is
Luciano Vecchio.
Thank you. So it's funny. Luciano's success is, I find, really gratifying because he loves this stuff. I think he's a really good designer because I would say his work is not like traditional in the old. It's not old school. It's not like it's actually kind of clean and I'd say friendly, and there's a sweetness to that work that you don't see in like this sort of hardcore kind of grittiness that you might see in, like, say, David Finch or old Jim Lee. And yet there it is. It's out there in the world, and I love that. I love that we work in an industry, and I believe there's space for every kind of art. If you can find a project for it, you can find the artist that is your end of comics.
And Alex Ross is a big painter. Lee Bermejo is a big painter. Now you have Cena Grace, who does it all like digitally, which is not Cena Grace, Luciano Vecchio, who's doing it digitally, which is great. How we're able to accept people and their artwork that they're providing.
And so for me, what I find super gratifying in our business is whenever you find someone you might think when you're able to find a space for them, right? I think it's an artwork that might not match a house style, but is good, and here's the project for it. And I adore him, and so I'm really, really happy for him.
There you go, 100%. And now people are in the chat are talking about how much they love Heroes Reborn, and you didn't like Empire? You guys are trolling at this point. I'm sorry. Heroes Reborn is not... I love Jason Aaron, but Heroes Reborn is something that I wasn't interested in when it was introduced in his Avengers. And I dropped Avengers. No, thank you. Guys, come on now. No, Heroes Reborn is House of M repeated through the Eyes of Blade. It's not good. Oh wow! I'm sorry.
I can listen to this. This is the sort of stuff again that makes me very, very happy. I do have to tell you, I'm actually a little mortified. I'm gonna have to wrap up pretty soon now.
Oh yeah. I wasn't gonna keep this more than an hour.
Okay.
I have an eye on the time. I wasn't gonna keep you here forever.
Only because I really do have to go draw comics.
You really do have to. Oh, you have to go to work.
Yeah, I actually have to go to work. Yeah, so I tend to work. I'm a late night guy. Like I'm a night owl, so I tend to get a lot of work done in the evening.
That's why you're always responding to me at like 2 a.m.
Yeah, which means I have no social life, but that's when I get my work done.
No wonder you've called late night. There you go. But anyway, yeah, you've been doing these covers. Is there anything else that you would like to bring to the table of this discussion as we're wrapping everything up?
So just two things. So as you mentioned earlier, I'm working on a Black Label graphic novel. It's been for a long, long time. It's coming out in October. It's called Historia. Kelly Sue DeConnick, who wrote Aquaman and Captain Marvel and Bitch Planet, she's the author, and it is the it's the history of the Amazons, of Wonder Woman's people, and it's some of the best work I've ever done. I'm actually really excited. That comes out in October. I have a bunch of variant covers coming out from Marvel, and then a couple other surprises that I will keep under my hat until they're announced. But that graphic novel has been the big thing I've been working on for the past couple of years. It's very, very pretty. And Kelly Sue's take on that material is just mind-boggling to me. So it's a real honor to be able to draw for her.
Dude, there you go. And Kelly is a great writer. If you guys have not checked out Aquaman, you're doing yourself a disservice. Go check it out. It was, I want to say, is one of the better works on Aquaman. I would have liked to see her stay on the book a little longer.
I think there was some kerfuffle behind the scenes. But yeah, I
liked it.
She's just terrific. And if you like her stuff, she's I was thinking about the writers I've worked with in the past, and she's probably one of three that I find the most inspiring.
Right. Yeah, she's amazing. I love her. I love the way she thinks. Her thought process towards certain material is so fresh, and it's so different. Right. It's fresh. It's a nice little left field kind of thing that I wouldn't have thought. So definitely, guys, I'm excited for that. This was news to me when we were talking backstage. But also, before I leave, make sure you guys tune in to Weekly Wrap tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Like I said, all you have to do is show up to the chat. Hashtag Wonder Woman. You're entered into the giveaway. You do have to stay till the end because we will be announcing the winners with Becky and Michael. So if you have a question for them, you can ask. They're the creative team on Wonder Woman, which is sorry, Phil, but this is one of the better work. This is one of the best works on Wonder Woman. Phil's is awesome. And other than that, Alex and Claire will be on the show on Saturday, followed by an incredible guest list of creators coming at you guys for July, starting with John Beatty, and then John Romita Jr. will be following, which is going to be great on the channel. And you know that I have a Hall of Fame, Hall of Shame every Monday. But you guys, this is Tag Team Thursday. Okay, so make sure you guys have watched Rod Just Reeking in his comics over on his channel at 6:30. John's Comics with Kids 6:45 with community news. Old Wolf with Happy Hour and his new complex at 7 o'clock. And then of course you guys are here today. Thank you guys so much. You guys know where to find Phill Jimenez over on his Instagram. He's posting his artwork a lot. And he's always spotlighting other LGBTQ people in the community every day. So I do want to spotlight as well. So thank you guys all for your continuing support of both me and Phil. Thank you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
And I hope you guys have a great day. Just remember, no matter what you do, every day can affect somebody. So make sure it's positive. All right. Have a good one, you guys. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.